someone died, and no one knows how. The killer vanished without a trace. No motive, no witness, just a chilling crime scene and a trail of questions that lead nowhere. But what if the truth was buried on purpose? What if the real story was never meant to be found? This isn't just a murder. This is a puzzle soaked in blood. Stay till the end, because every minute takes you one step closer to the killer. Los Angeles, 1947. A quiet morning stroll turned horrific when a passerby discovered the mutilated body of a young woman in a vacant lot near Leimert Park. She was posed deliberately, her body severed at the waist, drained of blood, and eerily calm in appearance. Her name was Elizabeth Short, but history would remember her by another name, the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth was a 22-year-old aspiring actress, drawn like so many to Hollywood's elusive promise. Described as stylish and soft-spoken, she moved between boarding houses and cocktail lounges, often alone, often misunderstood. The days leading up to her death remained shrouded in uncertainty. Her final movements, last conversations, and the person she was seen with remain pieces of an unfinished puzzle. What sets this case apart isn't just the brutality of the murder, but the strange precision behind it. The surgical nature of the cuts, the absence of blood at the scene, the chilling fact that the killer washed her body clean. As investigators pieced together her fragmented life, the media descended, twisting fact into spectacle. Rumors spread. Letters, supposedly from the killer, arrived at newspapers, some containing personal belongings, others cryptic clues. Despite thousands of interviews and dozens of suspects, including doctors, drifters, and Hollywood elites, the case remains open, unsolved. Decades later, the file still sits in LAPD archives, thick with dead ends and lingering questions. Who was the person behind the crime? And why did they choose Elizabeth? The answers may lie buried beneath the glamour and shadows of post-war Los Angeles, a city where dreams and nightmares often share the same stage. Northern California, late 1960s. A region known for its quiet towns and winding coastal roads, was about to become the hunting ground of one of the most elusive serial killers in American history. He called himself the Zodiac, and his reign of terror began not with a message, but with bullets under a moonlit sky. His victims were often young couples, isolated in cars parked on lovers' lanes. The first confirmed attack came in December 1968. Teenagers Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were found shot near Vallejo. 7 months later, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were gunned down in a similar setting. But this time, the killer called the police himself. Calm, precise, unrepentant. Then came the letters. Cryptic, taunting, and filled with ciphers, some still unbroken. The Zodiac took credit for at least 5 murders, though he claimed more. Each attack bore eerie hallmarks. A distinct pattern, messages sent to newspapers, and a symbol, a circle with a cross through it, that became his twisted signature. One of his boldest assaults came in daylight at Lake Berryessa. The killer wore a hooded costume, brandished a knife, and left his mark on the victim's car door. Days later, another murder, cab driver Paul Stein shot in the heart of San Francisco. Witnesses saw the killer walk away. Police arrived minutes too late. Despite composite sketches, suspects, and massive investigations, the Zodiac's identity has never been confirmed. He vanished into the fog of time, leaving behind only codes, corpses, and questions. Why did he stop? Did he die or simply change his name and routine? Somewhere, between the paper trails and bloodstains, the real face of the Zodiac waits, still hidden. In the autumn of 1888, the fog-laced streets of London's Whitechapel district became the stage for a series of murders so gruesome, they would define the word unsolved for generations to come. The killer was never caught, but the name he left behind, Jack the Ripper, still echoes through the alleyways of history. The victims were women, most living on the margins of Victorian society. Mary and Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly, each met a violent end, their bodies discovered in the dead of night, often mutilated with a level of anatomical precision that suggested medical knowledge or a cold, calculating obsession. London's police force, still in its early days of modern investigative methods, struggled to keep up. The killer taunted them through letters, some signed with a name that would forever fuse myth with murder: Jack the Ripper. One letter even arrived with a piece of a victim's kidney, preserved in alcohol. Newspapers fed the frenzy. The public lived in fear, and the press gave the killer infamy. Suspects ranged from butchers to aristocrats, even members of the royal family. Yet no arrest ever stuck. No name was ever proven. Over 130 years later, the case remains open in spirit. Its theories still debated by scholars, detectives, and amateurs alike. Was Jack the Ripper a lone madman, or a ghost of systemic darkness hidden within society itself? Somewhere, buried beneath layers of Victorian grime and archival dust, the truth may still linger, waiting, perhaps, for the right pair of eyes. Boulder, Colorado, December 26, 1996. In the quiet aftermath of Christmas, a 6-year-old girl was reported missing from her family's upscale home. 8 hours later, her body was found in the basement, lifeless, hidden beneath a white blanket. Her name was JonBenet Ramsey. She was a child beauty queen, known locally for her pageant wins and bright stage presence. Her death stunned the nation, not just for its cruelty, but for its setting. A crime scene inside a locked house, with no sign of forced entry, and a ransom note that seemed more theatrical than desperate. The note, long, oddly worded, and left on the family staircase, demanded $118,000, a figure that strangely matched John Ramsey's recent work bonus. The tone of the letter mimicked lines from popular films. Investigators quickly turned their focus inward, toward the family. But no charges were ever filed. Public opinion split. Some believed an intruder was responsible, slipping into the house and committing the crime before vanishing without a trace. Others pointed to inconsistencies in the parents' behavior and gaps in the timeline. The investigation was marred by early missteps: contaminated evidence, a delayed autopsy, and a media frenzy that clouded the facts. Years passed. Grand juries convened and dissolved. DNA evidence surfaced, suggesting an unknown male, but no one was ever arrested. To this day, JonBenet's murder sits in the shadows of American criminal history. The house on 15th Street has changed owners. The headlines have faded. But one question remains, cold and unresolved. Who killed JonBenet Ramsey, and why? The windswept stretch of Gilgo Beach on Long Island's southern shore holds more than sea and sand. Between 2010 and 2011, investigators uncovered the remains of multiple victims, many wrapped in burlap, scattered along Ocean Parkway. The discovery sparked a chilling realization. A serial killer had been operating in plain sight, possibly for over a decade. The case began unintentionally. Police were searching for Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort who had vanished after a frantic 911 call in 2010. They didn't find Shannon, at least not right away. But what they did find was more disturbing. The bodies of 4 women, all sex workers, all killed in a similar manner. As the search expanded, more remains surfaced. Some were dismembered, others belonged to unidentified individuals, including a toddler and an Asian male. In total, at least 11 victims were found along the stretch between Gilgo Beach and Jones Beach. The press dubbed the unknown perpetrator the Long Island serial killer, or LISK. For years, the case stagnated. Jurisdictional confusion and lack of shared evidence hindered progress. Then, in 2023, a breakthrough. A suspect named Rex Hoyerman was arrested and charged in connection with several murders. But the arrest brought more questions than answers. Why do so many victims remain unidentified? Could there be more than one killer? And what happened to Shannon Gilbert, whose case remains open, but officially separate? Beneath the dunes of Gilgo Beach lies a trail of secrets, some now uncovered, many still buried, waiting for truth to surface from the tide. June 10, 1912. In the small town of Villisca, Iowa, a quiet morning turned grim as neighbors discovered an entire family brutally murdered inside their home. Josiah and Sarah Moore, along with their 4 children and 2 young houseguests, were found bludgeoned to death. All 8 victims had been slain in their sleep, their faces shattered, their skulls crushed with the blunt end of an axe. What shocked investigators was not just the violence, but the eerie signs of planning. The killer had covered mirrors with cloth, placed a piece of bacon next to the axe, and draped garments over the victims' faces. Doors were locked from the inside. The murder weapon belonged to the Moores. Word of the crime spread quickly, drawing crowds and press from across the Midwest. But as the days passed, so did any clear leads. Suspects emerged, including a traveling preacher, a jealous rival, and even a state senator, but no one was ever convicted. Theories abounded, but evidence was scant. In a time before modern forensics, even fingerprinting was primitive and often unreliable. The house still stands today, preserved as a museum, untouched by time, heavy with silence. Paranormal investigators claim the spirits of that night remain. Skeptics call it folklore. Historians call it one of the most chilling unsolved mass murders in American history. Over a century later, no confession, no arrest, and no definitive suspect. Just the echo of an axe, and the quiet dread of a crime without reason or end. Philadelphia, February 1957. Along a wooded roadside in the Fox Chase neighborhood, a man stumbled upon a cardboard box lying in the underbrush. Inside was the small, bruised body of a young boy, naked, malnourished, and wrapped in a plaid blanket. He had been beaten, his hair recently cropped, his identity unknown. The label on the box read, "Fragile. Handle with care." For decades, he was known only as America's unknown child. The police scoured orphanages, hospitals, and missing child reports. Thousands of flyers were distributed. Leads poured in from psychics, from wanderers, from desperate calls by citizens across the country. None led to a name. None led to a killer. The boy's body showed signs of long-term abuse, faded scars, healing injuries, a haunting suggestion that he had lived unseen, unloved, then discarded. Over time, the case became part of Philadelphia's cold case legacy, its unsolved nature both tragic and surreal. Generations of detectives pursued it. None broke it. Then, in 2022, after 65 years, DNA technology finally gave him a name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. He was 4 years old, born into a fractured family. But even with that revelation, the mystery only deepened. Who hurt him? Who left him there? And why did no one ever come forward? The boy in the box now has a name, but the story behind his death, the silent years of suffering, the final moments in that box, remain locked in the past, waiting for the rest of the truth to emerge. Spring, 1946. The twin towns of Texarkana, straddling the Texas-Arkansas border, found themselves gripped by fear as darkness fell. A masked figure was stalking young couples parked on secluded roads and killing them. The press called him the Phantom Killer. The people called him something worse, unstoppable. The first attack came in February. A couple was brutally beaten, but survived. A month later, 2 were found dead, shot near their car under the cover of night. The killer struck again and again, 5 times in total, leaving behind a trail of fear, blood, and silence. He targeted lovers' lanes using a pistol, always disappearing before anyone arrived. Panic swept Texarkana. Businesses closed early. Residents armed themselves. High school dances were canceled. Police from 2 states joined the hunt, setting traps, interviewing hundreds, but the phantom remained a shadow. Suspects emerged. One man, Yowell Swinney, was imprisoned on unrelated charges, and some believed he was the killer. But the evidence was never conclusive. No confession, no trial, just theories, rumors, and time. The case inspired films, urban legends, and generations of speculation. But the truth behind the hooded figure who hunted beneath the moonlight remains hidden. Was it a lone drifter, A local with a secret? Or a ghost of wartime violence that never left? In Texarkana, the Phantom Killer became more than just a man. He became a mystery that still walks the line between folklore and fact. Between 1986 and 1989, along the scenic Colonial Parkway in Virginia, a stretch known for its historical beauty became the silent backdrop for a chilling series of double homicides. Young couples, often parked near the water or tucked into wooded clearings, were found murdered or simply vanished, under circumstances both intimate and terrifying. The first known victims were Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, found in Thomas's Honda Civic, submerged near a bluff, their throats slashed with disturbing precision. A year later, David Knobling and Robin Edwards were discovered in a different location, both shot, both left in the open. Then Keith Call and Cassandra Haley disappeared altogether. Only their car was found. No bodies, no answers. More cases followed, each echoing the others in setting, method, and mystery. There were no signs of robbery, no clear motive. The killer or killers left almost nothing behind. The FBI led a task force. Dozens of suspects were questioned. Criminal profilers speculated it could be a law enforcement officer, based on how willingly the victims seemed to park or remain in isolated areas. Despite similarities in the cases, remote lovers' lanes, young victims, pairs of two, no single suspect has ever been arrested or definitively linked. DNA evidence exists in some of the crimes, but still, the trail runs cold. The Colonial Parkway today remains beautiful, unchanged in its quietness. But for the families of the victims, every curve in the road holds a question that's never been answered. Who hunted there? And why did they stop? Or did they ever? The answers may still lie buried in the woods or locked away in a forgotten case file. In the dusty outskirts of Albuquerque, New Mexico, a grim discovery in 2009 would uncover one of America's most disturbing unsolved serial murder cases. A woman walking her dog noticed something protruding from the desert soil. What police would soon find were human remains. Many of them. The site yielded the bones of 11 women and an unborn child, all buried in shallow graves across the arid West Mesa. Forensic analysis revealed they had gone missing between 2003 and 2005. Most were young, Hispanic, and involved in sex work or struggling with addiction. Victims who had slipped through society's cracks long before they were buried beneath its surface. The press called him the West Mesa Bone Collector, a killer who hunted in the shadows of a growing city, hiding bodies in land destined for development. His burial ground remained untouched for years, masked by dust storms and urban expansion. Despite dozens of interviews, tips, and a list of potential suspects, including a convicted rapist and a man with photos of missing women, no one has ever been charged. Some believe multiple people may have been involved. Others point to police negligence or a deeper conspiracy tied to drugs and trafficking. The development of the site has since been halted. Makeshift memorials now mark the place where lives were silenced and forgotten. But the killer or killers remain unknown, vanished into the same landscape that hid their crimes. And for the families left behind, justice lies somewhere beneath the desert sun, waiting to be unearthed. In the quiet, forested community of Keddie, California, Cabin 28 once seemed like any other rustic retreat, until April 12, 1981, when it became the scene of one of the most brutal unsolved murders in American history. Inside the cabin, 3 bodies were discovered bound with medical tape and electrical wire, beaten, stabbed, and mutilated. The victims were 36-year-old Glenna Sue Sharp, her teenage son John, and his friend Dana Wingate. Hours later, Sue's 12-year-old daughter Sheila would find them, returning home from a sleepover. But the horror didn't end there. Sue's younger children, Greg, Rick, and Tina, had been in the cabin that night. Greg and Rick were found unharmed in a back bedroom, apparently spared. Tina was missing entirely. Her remains wouldn't be discovered until 3 years later, in a remote location over 80 miles away. Despite numerous interviews, early suspects, and disturbing inconsistencies in the investigation, no one was ever arrested. Evidence went unprocessed. Leads were dismissed. Some claimed to cover up, others pointed to local men known to the family, both of whom were questioned but never charged. The case grew colder with each passing year. But in recent times, new evidence has surfaced. Lost files recovered, old tape recordings re-examined, and DNA testing reignited. Still, no convictions, just speculation, and a lingering sense of betrayal by those who should have protected the victims. Cabin 28 has since been demolished, but the mystery remains, etched into the pine trees and silence of Ketty. Who entered that cabin? Why was Tina taken? And why, after more than 4 decades, is justice still waiting outside the door? On a cold November afternoon in 1970, deep in Norway's Istelen Valley, known locally as Death Valley, a man and his daughters stumbled upon a horrifying scene. Hidden among the rocks and trees lay the charred body of a woman. Her hands curled upward, a classic sign of intense heat. Nearby were burned belongings, clothes without labels, a watch with the face peeled off by fire, and an empty liquor bottle. No identification, no witnesses, just a trail of strange clues. Authorities quickly realized this was no ordinary case. The woman had multiple aliases, passports from different countries, and had traveled across Europe in the months before her death. Hotel staff recalled her constant disguise: wigs, dark glasses, evasive behavior. In her suitcases, later found at a train station, were coded notes, wigs, and prescription-free glasses. All traces of her identity had been deliberately erased. Her cause of death was officially ruled as suicide by barbiturate overdose and self-immolation. But the evidence told a murkier story. Why were her belongings burned? Why was she seen meeting with unknown men? And how did no one, anywhere, ever come forward to identify her? Some suspect espionage, an agent caught in Cold War crossfire. Others believe she was the victim of a far more personal crime, perhaps silenced for what she knew. Decades later, DNA testing has offered faint leads, suggesting Eastern European heritage. But her name, her past, and the reason she died alone in Istelen remain a riddle. She is still known only as the Istel Woman, an enigma etched in fire, smoke, and silence. On the night of December 30th, 2000, in a quiet neighborhood in Setagaya, Tokyo, an entire family was brutally murdered just hours before the new year. Mikio Miyazawa, his wife Yasuko, and their 2 young children, Nina and Rei, were found stabbed to death in their own home. What makes this crime extraordinary isn't just its brutality, but the behavior of the killer. After entering through a bathroom window, the intruder murdered the family one by one, likely starting with young Rei in his sleep. Then he stayed. For hours, he used the family's computer, ate ice cream from the freezer, left his feces in the toilet without flushing. He changed clothes from the family's wardrobe. He even slept on the living room sofa. Evidence was everywhere: blood, fingerprints, even the killer's DNA. Clothes were left behind, purchased in a specific region. Sand found in his bag pointed to a U.S. military training area in Japan. And yet, after 2 decades and thousands of leads, no arrest has ever been made. The motive remains unclear. Nothing significant was stolen. No enemies, no warnings, just a quiet family, erased by a stranger who felt no rush to leave. Every year, Japanese police still appeal for tips. Age progression sketches have been released. Yet the killer's face remains in shadow, his name unknown. In a city where crime is rare and order is sacred, the Setagaya murders stand out. A chilling reminder that even in the heart of modern Tokyo, some darkness walks unseen and lingers just beyond reach. In the fall of 1982, a wave of sudden deaths swept through the Chicago area, baffling doctors, terrifying families, and sending a chill through the heart of America's medicine cabinets. The victims shared no clear connection until investigators uncovered one chilling detail. Each had taken extra-strength Tylenol shortly before dying. Autopsies revealed cyanide-laced capsules. It wasn't a factory error or accident. Someone had tampered with the bottles after they hit store shelves, placing deadly poison in a trusted household name. 7 people died within days. Among them, a 12-year-old girl, a young mother, 3 members of one family. The randomness of the victims made the act even more sinister. There was no target, only chaos. Panic spread nationwide. Johnson & Johnson issued an unprecedented recall of over 31 million bottles. Supermarkets pulled products. New safety measures were introduced, including tamper-evident packaging and sealed caps, changing the pharmaceutical industry forever. Despite massive efforts by the FBI and local authorities, no one was ever charged with the murders. A man named James William Lewis was convicted for extortion after sending a letter demanding money to stop the killings, but he denied involvement in the poisonings themselves. The Tylenol murders remain unsolved. A case with no fingerprints, no witness, and no clear motive. Just 7 lives stolen by an invisible hand, and a nation forced to question the safety of its most ordinary habits. Over 40 years later, one question still lingers on the shelf. Who poisoned the pills, and why? On November 7, 1969, Sister Catherine Cessnick left her Baltimore apartment to run a simple errand. She never returned. 2 months later, her body was discovered in a remote wooded area. Her skull fractured by a blunt object, her killer still unknown. Sister Kathy was beloved by her students at Archbishop Keough High School, where she taught English and drama. But beneath the surface of that Catholic institution, a darker story would later emerge. Multiple former students revealed they had been sexually abused by Father Joseph Maskell, a priest with close ties to the school and to law enforcement. Some claimed that Kathy had learned of the abuse and had intended to speak out. One former student, Jean Weiner, alleged that Maskell had taken her to see Kathy's body as a warning. If true, it suggested not just a murder, but a conspiracy to silence her. Despite these claims, no charges were ever filed against Maskell before his death in 2001. The church denied knowledge. The case grew colder with every passing year. In 2017, the Netflix documentary The Keepers reignited public interest, shedding light on both the abuse and the institutional silence that followed. New tips surfaced. Maskell's body was exhumed for DNA testing, but yielded no match. Was Kathy Cessnick killed for what she knew, or for what she might have done? More than 5 decades later, justice remains distant. But for her former students and a growing number of advocates, Sister Kathy's voice continues to echo through time, demanding answers from a system built on secrecy. In the wealthy enclave of Greenwich, Connecticut, Halloween night in 1975 ended in tragedy. 15-year-old Martha Moxley was found brutally murdered beneath a tree in her family's backyard. Bludgeoned and stabbed with a golf club, the shaft shattered from the force of the blows. The murder weapon came from the Skakel household, neighbors just across the yard. And suspicion quickly turned toward members of the Kennedy-connected Skakel family. Martha had spent the evening socializing at their home, yet the investigation stalled. No one was arrested. Witnesses changed stories. Leads grew cold. It wasn't until 25 years later, that Michael Skakel, nephew of Ethel Kennedy, was arrested and charged. Witnesses testified that Michael had confessed while at a rehabilitation school. In 2002, he was convicted of Martha's murder and sentenced to 20 years to life. But controversy followed. Critics questioned the evidence, the fairness of the trial, and the reliability of testimony. In 2013, his conviction was overturned. By 2018, the Connecticut Supreme Court affirmed that his legal representation had been inadequate and Skakel was released. To this day, he maintains his innocence. No one else has been charged. And Martha's case, once thought closed, has returned to uncertainty. Nearly 50 years on, her death still casts a long shadow over a community known for privilege and secrecy. The truth may rest not in forensic evidence, but in the closed ranks of a powerful family, and the silence of a night that never ended. Who killed Martha Moxley? The question remains, caught somewhere between justice delayed and justice denied. On September 7, 2012, 19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth was found bludgeoned to death in her off-campus apartment in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. A promising student at the University of North Carolina and a member of the Holly-Wasaponi Native American tribe, Faith's future had seemed bright. Instead, her life ended in violence and mystery. Her roommate had left their apartment unlocked the night before. When she returned that morning, she discovered Faith's partially clothed body, bloodied from a blunt force trauma to the head. Near the body lay a fast food bag with a chilling note scrawled on it. "I'm not stupid, BT. Jealous. Asterisk." Investigators found DNA at the scene and even released a speculative sketch based on it. Yet years passed with no arrest. The case grew colder, and questions mounted. Was the crime personal? Was it jealousy, revenge, or something darker? In 2021, nearly a decade later, a breakthrough came. Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares, a man loosely connected to Faith's social circle, was arrested and charged with her murder. His DNA matched the sample left at the scene. But as of now, no conviction has followed and many details remain sealed. Was justice finally closing in? Or just circling the same unanswered questions? The silence around Faith's death has lingered far too long. And though her family continues to seek answers, the case remains suspended in uncertainty. Who killed Faith Hedgepeth? And why did it take so long to find him? The truth may still lie buried in the quiet corners of a college town forever changed. On the morning of April 26, 1999, one of Britain's most beloved television presenters was gunned down outside her West London home. Jill Dando, known for her warm presence on the BBC and her work on the crime-solving program Crime Watch, was shot once in the head at close range. Broad daylight, no witnesses, no security cameras. The killing shocked the nation. Dando had no known enemies. Her life appeared calm, even ordinary, despite her fame. The weapon used was rare, a 9mm pistol modified to muffle sound. The execution-style shot led many to believe this was no random crime. Investigators scrambled for leads. A man named Barry George, living nearby, was eventually arrested and convicted. But the case against him relied on circumstantial evidence. After years in prison, George was acquitted on appeal. No physical evidence had ever tied him to the crime. Was it a stalker? A professional hit? A revenge killing related to her Crime Watch work? Some even speculated about involvement from shadowy international forces, though no theory has ever been proven. Despite one of the largest investigations in UK history, no one else has been charged. Over 2 decades later, the case remains unsolved. Who silenced Jill Dando on her doorstep and why? It is a question that still lingers in Britain's collective memory. A mystery as quiet and sudden as the single shot that ended a life and began a search for truth with no clear end. On December 28, 1978, 23-year-old Elizabeth Andes was found strangled and stabbed in her apartment in Oxford, Ohio, just days after graduating from Miami University. The discovery shocked the small college town. Her boyfriend, Bob Young, was the one who found her, and within hours, he became the prime suspect. Young was interrogated for hours without a lawyer and eventually gave a taped confession, but soon recanted, claiming it had been coerced. Despite the confession, there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. At trial, the jury acquitted him. Still, the case went no further. For decades, Elizabeth's murder remained stagnant, closed in the eyes of law enforcement, despite no conviction and no clear suspect. In 2015, a reinvestigation by journalists from WCPO Cincinnati and Serial's Accused podcast reopened public interest. Their deep dive into the case uncovered investigative gaps, overlooked leads, and potential alternative suspects, painting a picture of a flawed police process and a young woman whose story had been prematurely sealed. Today, Elizabeth Andes's murder is technically unsolved. No one has ever been held accountable. Her family, left with more questions than answers, still waits for the closure they were once promised. Was the truth ignored in haste or buried by time? The answer lies somewhere in the silent gaps of a forgotten file and the echo of justice still waiting to be heard. On the night of April 4, 1991, 20-year-old Angela Hammond vanished from a payphone in the small town of Clinton, Missouri. She was 4 months pregnant, speaking with her fiancé, Rob Schaefer, when she suddenly said a strange man was circling her car in a green pickup truck with a fish decal on the back window. Moments later, Rob heard her scream. He raced toward the payphone, spotting what he believed to be the same truck speeding away in the opposite direction. He gave chase, but engine trouble stopped him short. Angela was gone. Despite immediate efforts by law enforcement and an intense local search, no trace of her has ever been found. There were no signs of a struggle at the phone booth, no confirmed sightings afterward, no body. Only the chilling phone call and the image of a suspicious truck that was never located. Authorities considered multiple theories. Was it a random abduction? A targeted crime? A connection to other unsolved disappearances in the area? Angela's case is still open, still active, but no arrests have ever been made. Her family continues to hope, decades later, for either answers or a return. What happened to Angela Hammond that night in 1991? It's a mystery that haunts the quiet streets of Clinton. A voice cut off mid-conversation, a car that vanished into the dark, and a case still waiting for the truth to speak. In the early hours of April 18, 2016, Terry Missy Beavers arrived at the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas, to lead a fitness class. But within moments of entering the building, she was ambushed and murdered, beaten to death with what investigators believe was a hammer or similar blunt object. Surveillance footage from the church revealed a chilling figure, someone dressed in full SWAT-style tactical gear, calmly walking the halls with a slow, deliberate gait. The person's identity remains unknown. Their posture and movements sparked endless speculation. Was it a man? A woman? Was the outfit a disguise or a statement? Despite the eerie footage and a flurry of tips, the case has confounded investigators. No clear motive, no confirmed suspect. Even Missy's personal life, scrutinized for clues, yielded no definitive answers. The suspect had broken into the church well before Missy arrived, suggesting premeditation. But nothing was stolen. It wasn't a robbery. It was a targeted killing, executed with chilling precision under cover of a stormy Texas night. Years later, the haunting surveillance video remains one of the most circulated and perplexing pieces of evidence in a modern murder case. Who was behind the mask? And why was Missy Beavers the target? A mother, a wife, a fitness instructor, gone without justice. And a killer still walking free somewhere behind the calm, calculated steps of that grainy footage.